In other words, once you see that something is worth fighting for, whether it's the world, whether it's yourself, whether it's your friends, your family, freedom, whatever it is, then the things start to be far more meaningful. And it takes courage to do that because, of course, things are dangerous, the world's scary, and courage is not just courage is not just that you aren't afraid. Courage is when you go forward despite being afraid. The things in your life that frighten you, you probably can't control the things that frighten you. None of us can. I know we like to pretend like I'm not afraid of anything. If you're not afraid of anything, then you don't love anything. And I won't ask you right now. I will ask you several times throughout the school year, though, just to consider it. What's the dragon you're fighting? What's the armor that you're putting on that's actually making your fight worse? You're making it more difficult on yourself. You're making things harder on yourself. You're being counterproductive. What's the armor that you put on because you thought it was going to help you, but you can recognize it's actually harming you? There's a lot of them, man. There's a lot of things that we do that make things worse for us. But the point of the fairy tale is not to tell us that dragons are real. It's to tell us that dragons can be defeated. And that's the optimistic point of it. Can the dragon be defeated? No. Asterisk. Not with that attitude. But why does the story exist? Because the knight does defeat the dragon. He does win because dragons can be defeated. The things in your life that are holding you back from attaining the things that you want. The things that stand in your way. Those problems in your life that seem insurmountable. They're too big. They're too difficult. They're too dangerous. They can be defeated. No matter what it is, it can be defeated. You just got to find the right way because it can be defeated. What could they become? That's a bad way of asking the question, maybe. Well, what could they become? Lawyers, doctors, criminologists. What's that? Psychopaths. What's going to determine what they become?
How they grow up, what they're influenced by, because our maturity comes with how our brain is developed.
So there might be something to it, to what Cost is saying there, where because we look at adults like, well, too late. I don't mean in the sense that you're a lost cause, but you're pretty well already formed. There's a lot in us as humans that we really want to have hope. What do we have without hope? Right? That's why we should all vote for Camilla, because we all need hope for a better student government. But if we don't have hope, then we don't feel like we have anything. And there's something about little kids where we look at them and think, they could still be. Have you ever seen it's a terrible thing to say, but it's worth thinking about, really, when the little kid gets, there's a tragedy and some kids die, and we always say things like, they could have been a doctor. That could have been the one who's going to cure cancer. What are the odds? Most people are just mediocre, average, medium. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for some reason, we think if they could have contributed in some way, that their life would, it makes their death more tragic because of what they could have been. How many of us ever look at them and say, man, he could have been homeless someday. He could have been, and think of, whatever job you wouldn't want to have. He could have done that. Because we don't recognize that people have their own intrinsic value. We're valuable just because of the fact that we exist. You're valuable just because of the fact that you are. What you do with it is, well, that's up to you. And hopefully you make something really great of it. But if you start to recognize that you're valuable and you're meaningful just because of the way that you live, just because of the fact that you do live, then it gives you an opportunity to start maybe treating yourself like you matter. Because a lot of people treat themselves like they just don't matter. I hear people talk about themselves, I hear students talk about themselves in ways that they would never talk about their friends. They would never talk that way about their moms. And yet they'll put themselves down in ways that if somebody else walked in and said that about their best friend, they would argue and fight with you over it. But they'll say those terrible things about themselves. And I'm just thinking, man, if you understood what you really were and how valuable you are, and then maybe you would treat yourself accordingly. And then if you treat yourself accordingly, you might actually, you wouldn't give yourself up to so many silly distractions in life, And then you think about what it is you could possibly become. and what you could possibly become is so far outside of our imaginations, which is part of the problem. We kind of see this thing right in front of us. Like, oh, I'm only, we judge ourselves by, I don't know, by our grades or by our sports or by our lack of sports or our friends or our lack of friends or what our parents say about us, what our families say about us, or our neighbors say about us, or, rather than just kind of recognizing that just by the virtue of the fact that you exist. And of course, the problem there is that once you recognize that you're valuable just by virtue of the fact that you exist, that means everybody else is too. And if you're going to treat yourself accordingly, then of course that means treating everybody else accordingly. There's probably a thing in there where we see little kids and it kind of reminds us about the possibility and hope for the future and all the things that we would have wanted for ourselves, but we could have been if only this hadn't happened, or if only that hadn't happened. And yet what we oftentimes miss is that what you could become because of what happened. Tragedy is built into the name, tragedy. It's not good. We don't want to have to go through tragedy. But like thinking about what it is that tragedy can help build you into, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like you hear it in cliches, like pressure makes diamonds, and we all go, yeah, pressure makes diamonds. But here's the thing, pressure makes diamonds. That's the danger of speaking in cliches. They lose all meaning. They lose all truth value to us. But it's absolutely true. Because the thing that you could become is going to be shaped by the things that you suffer when you're younger and that you overcome or don't. And I like the fact that I started by asking you the things that were good and bad in the world, the stuff that's good. I like even like the little small things that we said here, like coffee and cars, and then the big things like freedom and family, because if you can find something good in all those little tiny things, then you can see something that's going to be good in the world around you and good in the people around you. And once you can kind of see because once you can see that the things that you overcome help to build you into the things that you could possibly become, then this stuff will start to make more sense to you. Because you recognize that as bad as the world can be, it isn't enough just to stop right there and then scratch our chins and frown and say, yeah, the world can be bad. No, instead, if I asked you, like, is anything up on this list worth fighting for? Cars, freedom, friends, family, coffee, cocaine, water, politics maybe even. Yeah, but then there's all this negative stuff too. Yeah, but what's the alternative?
Making it positive.
Yeah. In other words, once you see that something is worth fighting for, whether it's the world, whether it's yourself, whether it's your friends, your family, freedom, whatever it is, then the things start to be far more meaningful. And it takes courage to do that because, of course, things are dangerous, the world's scary, and courage is not just that you aren't afraid. Courage is when you go forward despite being afraid. The things in your life that frighten you, you probably can't control the things that frighten you. None of us can. I know we like to pretend like I'm not afraid of anything. If you're not afraid of anything, then you don't love anything. And that was something that someone told me a long time ago. It hit me like a ton of bricks because, he made a comment to me about how I seem to have a complete lack of fear. And I said, pretty much. And he says, dude, if you aren't afraid of anything, then you don't love anything. Like, what do you mean? I was like 13 or so. And he explains that if you love something, then you absolutely have a worry about it. That's what you do with things that you love. You're concerned about them, people, things. And that's one of the things that gives you a sense of things being worth fighting for. Again, yourself, your family, whatever. But if we just kind of focus on the negative all the time, like the world is dark, yes, but it's also so bright. And the reason it's dark is because good people don't fight for it. And I don't just mean like fight for the world and get out there and protest. I'm saying just fight for the small things in your life, the things that make life worth living. And the things that make life challenging and difficult, they're worth fighting over because they also will build you into the thing that you could be. You know? And again, what you could be is almost incalculable because none of us have ever become what we could become fully. So the first thing maybe is to know yourself. he talks about these brave knights. Any of you guys read those stories growing up, fairy tales?
They're dark as hell.
They're dark as hell, but look at what the message behind them is. Like you get the story of the dragon? Yeah, dragons. Like what? Okay, think about this for just a second. Let me have your attention on this. This is an important point, guys. Like a dragon. What do dragons do? They breathe fire. Okay, that's important. What's that? They destroy villages. True. Where do they live?
Mountains.
Yeah, they live in caves and castles. And what are they guarding there? Treasure. And what else? Princesses. So because you've got this dragon that's inhabiting a castle and guarding gold and princesses, well, of course, you need a hero to show up. And who shows up? The knight. 100%. Who said that? Yeah, someone last part I was asking him, who's a knight? And they were like, I said, man, let's just get over with. Who's the knight? And one kid goes, Lancelot, good man. And I said, because whenever I ask that question, my students always say Shrek. But yeah, by the way, the Shrek thing is perfect. By the way, that movie is close to flawless, this first Shrek. Now ask yourself, what is it that why does a dragon live in a castle? What use does a dragon have for a castle? Yeah, what use does a dragon have for gold and for princesses? Nothing. That should tell you that that story is about way more than just castles and gold and princesses. It's about way more than that. First off, the knight approaches the castle. Okay, so then what does a castle represent? Who lives in castles besides dragons? Kings, queens, people of high status. So you recognize now, hopefully, that the castle represents status. Status. You don't live there if you're a nobody. Only really important people live in castles. So these castles therefore represent being important, being meaningful, being significant. And the knight walks up, and what is this knight wearing? Because he's about to fight a dragon. What does he have to wear? Armor. Really? Think about it. He wears armor. Protect himself from what? The fire-breathing dragon.
But also status.
Hang on. Let that sink in. What's that? He's going to get burned alive. All the dragon has to do is get close with the fire because you're wearing a suit of metal. All you got to do is heat the metal and then you're going to cook on the inside like a brazen bull. It makes no sense why he'd wear this armor. But then again, well, we can laugh at him, but isn't that kind of like what we do a lot of times? We approach the biggest problems in our lives doing, with these these defense mechanisms that actually make things worse for us. They don't make things better. They make it worse. So he goes into the castle because he's going to go fight for the status, and he's going to kill this thing. Can dragons be beaten? They're huge. They fly. They breathe fire. Can you defeat this thing? No. It's impossible. No. I mean, not with that attitude. But it's a completely impossible feat to defeat this dragon. So now start to piece it together. You're a person, you're going through your life, you're trying to attain status, and the things that you're fighting are bigger than you. They breathe fire. You can't reach them. And therefore, what does the gold represent? Obvious.
The thing that you want to get but can't.
What do people want to get that most people think they can't?
A job.
A job. Wait, what does a job get you?
Money.
So what does the gold represent? Money, wealth, status, wealth. What does the princess represent? Love. So what are people out there trying to attain in their lives? Status, money, wealth. Status, money, love. Status, money, love. So now the knight goes in, he fights the dragon, and he has to overcome the dragon. But the dragon is something that's going to burn him up. And by the way, that's the thing that you tell me what those dragons are in your life that you can think of that eventually will settle in, that are burning you up. If you pursue them, they're going to eat you alive. They're going to destroy you from the inside. The things that you think you want. But the pursuit of them can just consume you like a fire. And by the way, there has to be some kind of There has to be a kind of a consequence for it. When the knight enters the castle, in most good fairy tales, you're going to see that there are skulls and bones piled up. The bodies, the remains of knights that have come before him. It's one of the reasons that if any of you guys watch any of the Marvel movies, you might walk away feeling dissatisfied in a lot of ways. You might be like, oh, it's an interesting story, oh, it's so much fun. But does it mean anything? Why? Because the multiverse, what happens if Wolverine dies? He's alive in a different universe. Death doesn't mean anything anymore. There's no finality to it. Even when Black Widow dies, she comes back in a prequel. Nothing is final. There's no consequences for anything. But in these old fairy tales, you recognize this is true danger. If this knight is killed, he's going to join the piles of bones on the sides of the castle when he enters. So you go in and you fight the dragon. And that's something that a lot of people can spend their entire lives doing, fighting the dragon. And I won't ask you right now. I will ask you several times throughout the school year, though, just to consider it. What's the dragon you're fighting? What's the armor that you're putting on that's actually making your fight worse? You're making it more difficult on yourself. You're making things harder on yourself. You're being counterproductive. What's the armor that you put on because you thought it was going to help you, but you can recognize it's actually harming you? And there's a lot of them, man. There's a lot of things that we do that make things worse for us. But the point of the fairy tale is not to tell us that dragons are real. It's to tell us that dragons can be defeated. And that's the optimistic point of it. Can the dragon be defeated? No. Asterisk. Not with that attitude. But why does the story exist? Because the knight does defeat the dragon. He does win because dragons can be defeated. The things in your life that are holding you back from attaining the things that you want. The things that stand in your way. Those problems in your life that seem insurmountable. They're too big. They're too difficult. They're too dangerous. They can be defeated. No matter what it is, it can be defeated. You just got to find the right way because it can be defeated. That's the heroism. That's the brave knight, the heroic courage, because whoever defeats it will not be the person who sits in the corner and goes, It's going to be the person who goes forward anyway, recognizing the danger of it, recognizing the seeming impossibility of it, but goes forward anyway. Because if we don't recognize that dragons can be defeated, then we're just making the world darker. If we just say, big scary dragon breathes fire, will kill you, the end. We're sending messages to kids, the world's a scary, scary place. Don't go. Rather than the world is both scary and encouraging, but worth fighting for. I don't know about you guys, man, but everybody I love is in this world. And that's where I keep all my stuff. So it's worth fighting for. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Neat. Happy Thursday.
I'm Thursday.
Something positive.